Hey, it's Heike. I was wondering if you're doing the same thing. Categorizing habits, that is. Do you have a category for good habits and a category for bad habits? Well, you're not alone. Many of us are striving to do better in the good category and striving to reduce or minimize the not so good habit category. But categories seem to have a life of its own. They seem almost that we can't control them, and willpower is definitely not the answer when it comes to habits. Today, you will learn that you can change your thoughts and rewrite the story that you have been telling yourself about habits. And today's habit is about the habit of drinking alcohol or alcoholism. You will learn about the beliefs around alcohol, how they affect your body, and how they're different for men and women, and how you can get a hold or a handle on your drinking habits in today's episode. But before we dive in, I would love it if you left a review on the Apple Podcast. This will help the show to be found by more people. So with that, let's dive into today's episode. I'm Heike Yates, a fitness and nutrition coach with 30 years of experience. I empower women over 50 to take back their health and strength to lead a vibrant life. Right now, you're joined by thousands of women over 50 around the world who stop dimming their light and instead ignite their spark. On this podcast, I do what I do best, taking complicated information about fitness, nutrition, and mindset strategies and breaking it down into baby steps that are simple, actionable, and sustainable so you can implement them into your life. I regularly interview some of the most inspiring women who share their honest stories on how they went from their worst to their best life so that you know you're not alone in your struggles. Join me as we redefine what aging looks and feels like by taking action and saying, yes, I can. This is the Pursue Your Spark podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Molly Watts. She is the author, mentor, and podcast host of Breaking the Bottle Legacy. Breaking the Bottle Legacy is dedicated to helping daily drinkers and adult children of alcoholics change their relationship with alcohol. After living under the influence of her mother's alcohol abuse for most of her life and loathing what alcohol had meant to their relationship, it felt like a bitter irony when Molly had to acknowledge her own dysfunctional drinking. She changed her 30-plus year daily drinking habit and was able to create a peaceful relationship with alcohol, past, present, and future. She now helps others who worry about their drinking do the same. Molly, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Heike. So good to see you.
I know it's been such a long time, and the last
Yeah.
time we talked about habits also.
No, exactly. Exactly. It was kind of one of those things where I was talking on one side about all this positive, healthy, happy stuff, and at the same time feeling kind of like an imposter because I knew that behind the scenes I had this one pretty bad habit that I just couldn't seem to shake.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
here we are today with your new brand and your new learned skills and
Yeah.
habits. I want to know, when did you realize that your mom was an alcoholic, and describe what that was like and what your relationship was like?
Wow. Well, my mom first admitted to me that she was an alcoholic when I was 13. And but it had been going on for some years at that point. I talk about it actually in my book. It was a Saturday morning, and I remember it very vividly because I got I decided I was going to confront her, and she was ironing, and she had vodka on the rocks in a glass. designed to look like water, of course, so that I wouldn't, no one would question it. And I marched in and asked her if she thought she was an alcoholic, and told her, what's that I was on, that I knew what was going on. And I was just enraged when it happened. And I was so sure that I was going to be the person that stopped it all, at 13. And she did admit it to me. But that didn't change much in terms of what transpired. So she went on to keep drinking, and she went to rehab 4 different times over the next 40 years. The last time when she was 77, which is almost unheard of
Wow.
in alcohol recovery. First of all, most alcoholics don't live that long. Secondly, it's just not something that we talk about is in the senior population. And yeah, and she went to a place for the reluctant to recover, a 9-month inpatient program at the age of 77. And I'm pretty sure I know she was the oldest, the oldest resident patient then, and I'm sure she probably may still be the oldest they've ever had. But unfortunately, she drank 3 weeks after that. So it was a lifelong struggle, and ultimately, unfortunately, claimed her life. Actually, she died of an alcoholic binge just after her 81st birthday. So it was something that I have dealt with, like I said, most of my life. It really was the underscore of our relationship and our whole family's life for many, many years.
So when she started drinking, what describe a situation? So she was drunk, you were 13.
Mhm.
What was that like? What was
Yeah,
her
she
habits?
she was really she was a binge kind of drinker anyway. She drank, so she kind of typically I would get home from school or after school activities, and I would come home and she would just be sort of passed out on the couch. She just couldn't, she would, that was kind of her MO in the afternoon. She would drink and then fall asleep watching TV on the couch. And so, I would come home from school or whatever, and I would be all wound up wanting to talk about my day and tell her about, activities. And she would be incoherent and slurring and just not, you know, I can remember an, a, an episode where I was, and, as a young girl, you're kind of still not, you're trying to figure things out. And I'd get embarrassed by her behavior, friends with me, and she'd be acting like that. And I try to just say, "Oh, she's still sleeping. She sleeps so hard," and just kind of try to shrug it off. Uh, and then one time I had friends with me, and she got up and she went over and instead of going into the bathroom, went over to the dishwasher and started to pull down her pants to go to the bathroom because she was so out of it. And I was just mortified. I was just shocked. And those are just little, it was just, it went on for so long that the early memories of it um aren't as strong as the later memories of it, and all the different issues that would come down the pike that I had no way of anticipating back then. It was also something that was one of those hidden kind of things. My dad was a superintendent of schools. So I remember when I first challenged her about being an alcoholic and saying, "Why don't you get help?" And her excuse was it would ruin your father's career. And so that was an excuse that she used, and something that actually I didn't even broach the subject with my dad. We didn't even talk about it for another 3 years until I was about 16. And he then finally got brave enough to talk to me about it. And I remember him calling it Mom's Little Secret. And so that was Mom's Little Secret, was something that perpetuated and kept with us for years and years.
Mhm. Do you think it started out because when I think back in the 50s, it was so hip for women to start drinking and smoking.
Yeah.
This led to her alcoholism, or do you think
I
it
think
was?
that I think that she started drinking in the 70s, and I think it was more like, I think that I don't know, my I don't remember this very well, but my sisters tell me that there was a doctor in this, we lived in an apartment complex, and they would come down to watch me in the pool. I was little, and he was a doctor. He had the afternoons, whatever, off. And so they would have a drink poolside. And that's kind of where it started.
Mhm.
And then, from there, I think she was just, who knows? These days we use the term self-medicating. I don't know that we necessarily used that terminology back then, but I think that what happened probably was an innocent habit or an innocent exploration that then became something that she used on the regular to dampen her emotions or her negative feelings and kind of numb out, and then it just kept going.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you recognize that you had a problem with alcohol? When did you say, wait a minute?
Yeah, it's funny because would have told you that I didn't ever have a problem with alcohol. I was very, very cautious with, because my mother personified what an alcoholic was to me. I was very uh, critical of people that drank too much. I never liked to get to a point where I was feeling altered or silly, or, I just, that loss of control, because I had experienced it so often with my mother that, and it just drove me crazy not being able to have a conscious conversation with her and logical conversation. It drove me crazy. So I was always super cognizant of that. And so the thing of it is that instead I was drinking, you know, I would drink to a point where I never allowed myself to get to being intoxicated, but I drank 3 or 4 drinks per night over a slow period of time. And what was always in the back of my mind, and a situation for 30 plus years, there was always anxiety associated with fear of becoming an alcoholic, or crossing over a line, or acting like my mother, right? So I lived in this constant state of anxiety that I just sort of assumed, or or accepted, that that was just what was going to happen, right? That was just my lot, because at being the adult child of an alcoholic, I was just predetermined to have to deal with this anxiety, not realizing, not really ever looking at it from the other side and thinking, well, if I didn't drink this much, I wouldn't have all this anxiety. And I was so committed to trying to control it all that I never wanted to think about the idea of actually not doing it. I could not conceive of a time when I wouldn't want to have a drink after work.
Mhm. Did your drinking at all affect your family life, work, and just the lifestyle, or was it just
No.
kind of like just drinking?
Yeah, no, it didn't. And I think that's a pretty slippery slope that a lot of women live in.
Mhm.
This idea that because it's not costing me, I didn't hit some sort of rock bottom, because I didn't have some sort of epic DUI, or, terrible hangover that caused me not to be able to go into the office. I mean, none of that. But at the same time, what I didn't want to acknowledge or look at were all the health trade-offs that I was making, the weight gain, just the the lack of any energy to do anything else. I'm sorry, for me still, if I, what by the time if I have 2 drinks, I'm pretty much done for the night. I'm not going to be doing anything very productive. So it was a really the realization of everything that it was truly costing me. And there's a whole bunch of science that I share on the podcast, and I share in my book about all the things that I didn't realize that it was impacting. And so once I became it wasn't it was a 2-year process for me, of really changing everything, changing all of my thoughts around alcohol, changing my patterns, changing my behaviors, and really becoming someone now. I i said this recently on the podcast. I consider myself an alcohol minimalist now. I'm not completely I'm not completely alcohol free. I would never use the term sober or in recovery or anything like that because I wasn't ever someone that had a physical dependency on alcohol. So
And this is what you're mentioning is came across all these years in my training and with training clients. So many women, they come home, they have a drink or two, and then it's like, oh, it's dinner time. Let's have another drink or two. And by the time they're done, the whole bottle is gone. And that
yeah,
repeats itself over and over every night. And they're like, oh, one example with that is that somebody said, oh, I'm switching now to one drink a night. And I was like, oh, this is great, no bottle a night. And she says, yeah, now I'm drinking, I don't know what, scotch or some kind of hard liquor. And
right.
she's making herself a mixed drink now every night. So I'm like, okay, well, what's the trade-off here? And, what are some of the signs when you talk about alcohol, Molly? Like the signs of alcohol abuse? What would that look
Yeah.
like?
Well, there's a lot of great information from the CDC and from the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. And really, we used to use the terminology alcoholic, and today in this world, they don't call it that anymore. They call it alcohol use disorder. And there's a very clear scale going from all the way from mild to moderate to severe alcohol use disorder, and that gives you some very clear um, things to look at for your use and determining where you are on that scale. Um, the other part of it is really from a health perspective. The CDC recommends that too for women. Moderate drinking is no more than 7 drinks per week, and
Mhm.
that's 7 units of alcohol. So units are a very a very clear. Or it's actually in the U.S. it's 7 standard drinks, and a standard drink in the United States is 14 ounces of alcohol, or 14 grams. I'm sorry, of alcohol, which then you have to look at whatever you're drinking to determine the alcohol by volume, because whether it's a, a bottle of wine that's a 12 to 13% alcohol by volume, if it's a spirit, if it's a beer, if it's an IPA, which is what I love, a stronger beer, right? They All of those things matter in terms of really monitoring your use. But the thing that I like to say to people is, you can look at all the statistics and all of that physical recommendation. I mean, 1 drink per day and no more than 3 drinks on any given day for a female. And that's moderate, all right? But there has been no clinical proof that there is any benefit to drinking alcohol, any physical health benefit to drinking alcohol if you don't already drink it. So nobody should be going out and adding alcohol to their lives under the auspice of saying, well, drinking red wine is good for your heart, or, anything else like that. It's simply not true.
Yeah. So you think about the Mediterranean diet. That's what came to mind when you said
Yeah.
and red wine is like always. I mean, Italy always have a glass of red wine with lunch and dinner or two. But is it really true that these benefits are there, or are they just part of the marketing?
Well, it's really what you have to ask yourself with the Mediterranean diet, especially, is it really the wine that's helping them, or is it their work, their physical activity, the olives, the olive oil, the fish, the fresh vegetables? There's so much more to it. And what I'm telling you in terms of the clinical proof is that there's been no science on alcohol that shows a causative effect, a causative benefit effect. Everything with alcohol is associative, because they can't you can't just drink alcohol. You have to eat, you have to right? So
Right.
you can never just pinpoint alcohol. But what we do know about alcohol is that it is a known toxin, it is a carcinogen, and it's a gasoline. Ethanol, which is the chemical substance underneath all of our alcoholic drinks, is an additive for fuel. It's not, this is not the chemical property itself has or the chemical drug itself has very limited therapeutic effect, and a very long and storied history of lots of things that are bad for you when it comes to drinking alcohol.
So when you think now of the rise, and I'm thinking particular of clean wines,
Mhm.
organic wines, can you speak to that? Is there a difference?
Well, I think that the thing about clean wines and organic wines is it's taking out all the, the other stuff that's an additive in wine that might be bad for you, right? But it doesn't get rid of the alcohol. And at the bottom core, the ethanol is the drug, is the chemical substance that's actually known to be a carcinogen. That's the problem that actually impacts negatively. You know, there's a, there's a direct corollary for women between an increase in breast cancer and all sorts of other esophageal cancer, lung cancer. I mean, not lung cancer, liver cancer, stomach cancer. So, there's just a lot of different implications for alcohol for many different, like I said, many different cancers, and the link between being a positive impact for heart health is actually a little bit, again, misleading. There's a lot more science behind the negative impacts, especially for raising your blood pressure, which it does, and other impacts on cardiovascular health.
Yeah, that was my next question. So drinking, how does it affect our health?
Yeah.
It, and you just answered that question
Yeah,
because we don't think
it's
about that.
I talk about it in my ebook, Alcohol Truths: How Much is Safe, because again, I wanted to reiterate, I am not exclusively alcohol free, but I am very, very, I consider myself an alcohol minimalist and somebody who is going to be very mindful about every drink that I take. I want to make sure that I'm getting maximum benefit with minimum negative impact, right? So, I have my ebook, Alcohol Truths: How Much is Safe. And it's really all about determining what is your own personal level of safe. And that means taking into consideration the physical impacts. The other part about your physical health and alcohol is that alcohol's effect on you is dynamic. What that means is that every single time you drink, you're not going to know what's because the interactions are several. It depends on your age, it depends on your weight, it depends on how much you've eaten, it depends on how hot you are, it depends on how stressed out you are. It depends, there's all of this stuff because it affects our neurochemistry and our body's chemistry both. And so every time you drink, it's kind of like I say, it's like having your own personal petri dish. You're going to have to figure it out. You need to be mindful of how it feels and what's going on with your body. And that's just something to take into consideration. I don't think that you people need to completely eliminate drinking from their lives, but when they do drink, they need to be very mindful about it, and they need to make sure that it's aligned with their long-term goals for both health and social health and financial health, all of those things.
Yeah. Are men and women affected differently by alcohol?
Yeah, they actually are, because women actually, the science shows that women lack a certain um oh shoot, I'm not gonna be able to remember what the name of it is, but basically we process alcohol differently, and that's one of the reasons that women uh do not get intoxicated faster. Not it isn't just simply because we are smaller, and typically smaller and lower weight and things like that. We actually lack a chemical that or produce less of a chemical in our bodies that helps us process alcohol.
Okay, that's a good explanation because sometimes you see men that drink like the typical "I'll drink you under the table" kind of
Right.
thing. Like I
Yeah.
remember that from the college years. You're
Yeah.
like, "Hey, let's just go drinking."
Right. Right. It's a culture. I mean, the thing of it is that once you start really becoming aware of all the programming that goes on for you in your brain, all the subconscious programming, all the advertising, all the memes, everything, all the messages that we hear all the time about alcohol, once you really become aware of that and you counterbalance that with the science behind alcohol, you're just kind of left scratching your head. Like, if I know in stuff that I read and stuff that I look at all the time, the bottom line is, like, if alcohol were a drug right now, like if it was just coming onto the market, the FDA would ban it. I mean, that's how dangerous it is for us. So it's just interesting to see, you know,
It's a
the
it's a big industry and it makes
Mm,
a ton of money for
yeah.
somebody out there. And
A
you
ton of money for a lot of people out there, to be honest. I mean, that's one of the problem. I mean, you think about all the implications of the alcohol industry and all the service workers and all the restaurant. It impacts so many people that it's not going. And that's one of the things you really have to get confident with your own decisions about drinking is the alcohol industry, the advertising, it's not going anywhere. The alcohol being available at your neighborhood grocery store, not going anywhere. That is never it, at your favorite restaurant, at a ballpark, it's going to be around you. So you have to get to a spot where you are making your decisions for your own relationship with alcohol based on your own goals and your own information and your own education on it.
yeah, because the very depict or the pictures that you see about our age group, women over 50, usually when we see a picture of women getting together, there's always a glass of wine in the picture, and everybody is super happy and everybody's drinking. And I'm getting ready for a photo shoot, and my photographer said, "So, what is that something that your age group does a lot?" And the first thing that came to mind, drinking.
Hmm.
And I was like, whoa. And I said, I don't want to have a picture with a glass of wine. There's nothing wrong. Like you said, I love wine uh, with drinking, but it's just the idea that we can't sit around with, I'm holding a cup of tea or a cup of whatever, water, lemon water is just so suggestive
Hmm.
that that's what women our age are doing. We're sitting around drinking
Hmm.
socially.
Yeah.
Or when I hear somebody saying, uh, oh, let's meet for a glass of wine. I often have said, well, how about you meet your friend for a Pilates class or a walk instead?
Yeah.
You don't have to sit and drink and you can still be social, which is, I think the social aspect around drinking is so broad. Can you talk to
Yeah.
that about?
Well, it is, and the thing of it is that I would challenge everybody to start asking themselves is, when you're going to meet your friends, what is it that you're really looking forward to? Are you looking forward to connecting with people and sharing, hearing what's going on in their lives, having that social interaction, or because that's really what's most important in that scenario, right? It's the relationships that you have. And yet, the narrative that we often tell ourselves is, oh, I just love my glass of wine. Oh, I just love this. When you start really asking yourself, you really understand. And I mean, I had that same thought. I literally thought that I liked beer too much to ever give it up. Like, seriously, that was what I said to myself. Oh, there's just no way. Like, I would never do a full 30-day break from alcohol because no, I like my beer too much. I did not realize that by simply repeating that to myself all the time, right? That I actually created the desire in myself because that's what I told myself, right? There's this dynamic at work, and I talk about that a lot. A learning for me that my thoughts were what created my feeling of desire. I used to blame that desire on my genetics, on my alcoholic background, my growing up with an alcoholic parent, never putting it the power to control it out of my sphere and into something else that I couldn't control, right? And it's the same thing for anybody that really, and again, if you're drinking alcohol and you are not having any negative implications, if you're still working out all the time, if you're sleeping well, that's a big one, ladies,
Big one.
especially if you're a woman of midlife, if you're sleeping okay, if you're not gaining weight around your middle, if you're productive, happy, everything else, then, and you're not concerned about future health, the risk sides, right? If you've done the research, you understand the implications of alcohol in your life and you're comfortable and you're making good decisions, great. However, if you're a woman who is having some sleep issues, if you are constantly having anxiety, the thing about alcohol and what I didn't realize is that Alcohol has a biphasic effect, and it means that basically in the beginning, it increases both the depressant action in our brain and the stimulant action in our brain. And it's an it's an outside agent, right, coming into our brain, and so our neurochemistry gets altered. And the more alcohol you drink after a certain point in time, when it's dissipating and leaving your system, your brain's trying to get back to homeostasis, to kind of average, right? And so to counteract that depressant effect and it's leaving the brain's normal neurochemistry kicks up the stimulants to try to bring the brain back to even.
Mhm.
And so that's where the term, some people say hangxiety, because a hangover and anxiety, this the day after people drink too much, they may notice this reflex anxiety. And for people that are drinking repeatedly or habitually or daily, like I was, you can feed yourself that it gets into a loop, just because you basically, every time you start to come down off the alcohol, you get this rebound anxiety effect and you want to take a drink to get rid of that. So you do the same thing just over and over again.
Mhm. So you touched a little bit on habits. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about the habits that you told yourself that you couldn't live without your IPA.
Right.
What what other lies do we tell ourselves, or what, or how can we identify,
Oh,
saying, wait a minute, why am I telling myself this?
well, so this is, I think one of the biggest ones that I hear all the time is I need a drink to take the edge off.
Oh, yeah.
Like, like that kind of attitude, like I have to have a drink every day to take the edge off my day. Like that's kind of just the beginning of it. Anytime, anything that you're telling yourself about, that I just love this too much. I just need this too much. I have to, um, I enjoy, or it's, another one is like for just social lubrication, right? Like people can't imagine going to a party and not like, oh, I have to have a drink to loosen up. Like that kind of mentality, it's all just thoughts that you're telling yourself that perpetuate the habit, right? That continue you in that loop. You have to be able to change those attitudes and understand that alcohol, again, like once you really understand that alcohol doesn't exactly decrease stress, it can actually have a rebound effect and increase stress and anxiety. Then you start to work around in your brain and stop associating and stop thinking, I need a drink to take the edge off. Then I start thinking, alcohol actually causes me to be anxious. So I want to figure out different ways to cope with stress and anxiety. There are better ways. And just repeating, telling myself and changing my narrative on what is possible for me and what I actually need and what I actually want and what is actually true about alcohol.
That means you have to become really honest about yourself.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's you have to be, um I mean, the whole thing for me was understanding that I was the person, that the things weren't in control. Alcohol wasn't causing my desire. My work wasn't causing my stress, right? It's always 100% about your thoughts about all of those things. And so changing and being able to understand that I actually had the power in my own brain to change my relationship with alcohol and all of any habit that you have that doesn't serve you. It's always going to be about changing your thoughts and changing who you really want to be, and understanding that you are the one that gets to choose what you think. Not these aren't facts. The fact wasn't that I just loved alcohol too much. That's not a fact. That's just a story that I was telling myself.
Yeah. So what would you say to somebody who listens to this podcast and says, okay, I want to drink less. Or I'm going to look at it. Now let's start with, I want to drink less. I'm
Yeah.
drinking a half a bottle every night. What would be like a first step to
Yeah.
do?
Well, so for me, the first step was, like I said, so first of all, get really clear on your goals and your thinking about alcohol and what you really want alcohol to mean in your life and how you want to incorporate it into your life. But if you are really seriously just thinking, okay, but I really just want to cut back every day, you have to plan ahead. So and I tell people to plan ahead and use that logical forefront, the logical prefrontal cortex, not your impulse center, not your reward center that gets firing after when you're feeding a habit, right? Yeah, exactly. So you use your prefrontal cortex, you make a plan ahead of time. And at first I always tell people just meet yourself where you're at. So if you're drinking a half a bottle of wine in the first week, we're just going to say, okay, I'm going to drink three measured glasses of wine per night, and I'm going to meet myself where I'm at. I'm going to reflect on it after the fact. I'm going to look back. Did I stick to my plan? Sticking to the plan is important, being able to keep the promise to yourself. And then the next week, on a couple of different days, try plan for 2 drinks and stick to the plan. So it's an attitude of, you know what I mean? And then be willing to understand that just because you've decided that you're going to drink less and just because you're motivated to do it, when you go off plan and when you do not follow the plan, that does not mean that everything has gone wrong and you can't do it and you can't figure it out. It's simply an opportunity to learn what you were thinking at that moment when you decided not to drink on plan, and being able to look ahead and predict, okay, I'm setting this up, but I know that I'm going to mess up. And when I mess up, I'm not going to allow myself to quit trying. I'm going to say, I'm just going to take this as a time to learn more, and I'm still going to keep going. I'm going to figure this out. It's not an excuse to tell yourself, well, this is just not for me. I'm I'm just someone who's going to drink three way, it's just an opportunity, just knowing ahead of time, predicting failure instead of being derailed by a failure.
And I think also that applies to peer pressure.
Yeah.
It's like you're going, oh, well, when you're sitting at a dinner table and everybody is drinking wine and you, or whatever they're drinking, doesn't matter, beer, it doesn't matter, alcohol, and you're not drinking. And then it's like, well, you're not having a drink? Why you're not drinking? Oh, why did you have a beer or something?
Hmm.
I think that's a very big, the peer pressure I feel is so great sometimes that we get beaten down by that.
Yeah, I think, and again, that just it comes back to planning ahead, so you're going to go into a scenario and you know what you want to do. So if you plan ahead and you're like, I want to be able to enjoy this social situation without alcohol. I am committed to not drinking this time, when I go out. Just try it on. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be a a lifelong mission, right? You don't have to say to yourself, I'm never going to drink out with my friends again. But try things on, test it out, see how you feel when you go into that scenario. And when people are, pressuring you or saying to you, just have a drink, just, plan ahead for what your answer is going to be, for what that is going to, um, what your reason is for not wanting to, and be very confident in your own mind, and understand that when somebody is asking you to do something, to drink, whether it's drinking or doing anything else that has nothing to do with them and everything to do with you, they use a narrative in your mind that helps you empathize with them, that they have to feel like they need to to encourage you to drink. Something's going on with them, not with you, that is causing them to want to direct your behavior.
Yeah. I found that before COVID, when we were going out with friends or meeting friends for dinner, and I chose not to have a drink, people were just like, oh, okay. And it turned out that they actually, and I paid attention, they drank less than they normally would. So instead of their 2 or 3 glasses, they usually ended up with one, maybe
Mhm.
two at the most. It was interesting to notice because I just kept drinking bubble water. I'm like, yeah, this is great.
And
Yeah.
what's really, I think, important too, then, is to always, to really celebrate those times when you do those things, because the next day, and remind yourself the next day when you get up, oh, it feels so good to get up and not have that little dehydration from having a couple of drinks, or you just didn't sleep very well after you get a good night's sleep, and you're like, it feels so good to not have to worry about whether or not I am going to have a drink or not have a drink, you know?
Yeah. What would you say to our listeners as a final remark? What to do when they want to change their drinking habits?
So for me, I just did an episode, actually, I think it's just coming out this week, on my intuitive drinking alcohol toolbox. And so like I said, first of all, create a plan. Second of all, be ready and be prepared for the times when you fall off your plan. Educate yourself on alcohol science. There are just a bazillion books, podcasts, websites, articles, lots of good information on helping you understand, really truly understand the science behind alcohol. And once you start to understand the science and the effects on your neurochemistry, it becomes a lot less sexy and a lot less, glamorous to drink, and a lot more concerning, because it is a chemical toxin. And lastly, I would say find a tribe, find a community, find some online groups there's some great ones. Really, truly, I know this episode actually is coming out much later, but if people go to my podcast called Breaking the Bottle Legacy, look for the episode, my alcohol toolbox, my intuitive drinking toolbox. There's going to be a lot of links in the show notes for all of these resources, for books and for groups. And I have my own private Facebook group, so I would love to have anybody that's looking or curious about changing their relationship with alcohol. Again, I do not say that you can never drink again, but I think, or that you shouldn't. However, there are people that make the choice to be alcohol free, and that's a great choice too. I'm not saying either, there's anything, it all works, and less is better, right? So getting better is better. And so I would
There's
encourage,
nothing to it. Better is
right,
better.
right. So it doesn't matter if you're going down from drinking a bottle to a half bottle, that's better, right? And so it's all small steps. Like I said, it took me 2 years to really come to the point where I got. And now I'm just so thankful that I did, and really, I am at peace with my relationship with alcohol. And I say past, present, and future. That means that I don't harbor anger and resentment to my mother, even though she's deceased. I have a peaceful relationship with her too. I wish that she had understood that she had the power to change her relationship with alcohol. I wish that she understood that she could manage her own emotions and deal with that without it. Um, but I have had the life I have had the life that I needed to get to where I am. So
Yeah. So how can people reach you, Molly?
yeah. So again, Breaking the Bottle Legacy, available on all podcast app, platforms, wherever you would find it. And you can reach me also at www.mollywatts.com. That's Molly with a Y and Watts with an S.
And then you're on Facebook with
Yeah.
your
Facebook, I just the Molly Watts author, and then the Facebook group is called Change Your Alcohol Habit. And it's a private group, but you can search for it on Facebook, but it's private, so that if you're there, no one has to know you're in there. No one's going to see your posts or your comments, but you can look for it online.
you can refer back to this podcast episode if you're not sure, if you want to reach out. But this is the way you can find Molly. So I want to say thank you so much for being here, Molly. This was a very good, amazing topic, I think.
Yeah.
We're still in the pandemic, and we're hopefully at the end. And all of us, and that includes me, we've been drinking too much. Because like you said, it's the stress, it's the excuses, it's this and that and the other. And I think that's a good way to bring it to the forefront, and that we're not stuck with this habit.
Yeah. It's just make sure that your drinking is, like I said, you're getting maximum benefit and minimal harm.
Yep. And so thank you, listeners. I'm so glad you joined us today for this amazing episode. And if you want to reach out, all the links will be in the show notes. So it's easy for you to just click and get a hold of Molly's program, of her podcast, and so forth. But please reach out to us on social media. I'm at Heike Yates on Instagram, and Heike Yates Pursue Your Spark on Facebook, and all other social media outlets under Heike Yates and reach out to us. Let us know what this episode meant to you. If you had any questions, don't be embarrassed. Reach out because Molly will be more than happy to help you with anything you need when it comes to changing your habits. And in this case, the alcohol habits.
Yeah,
So, with that, my
absolutely.
friends, we are out of here. Thank you so much and ciao.
Thanks, Heike.
My pleasure.